Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for a review of the 1997 biography by Ken Emerson, Doodah, Stephen Foster, and the Rise of American Popular Culture. Ken Emerson, New Jersey-based music journalist and writer, was an editor for both the New York Times Magazine and for Newsday. For a while, he has written several books, as well as a number of articles on the history of American popular music. He's written books about both kind of the sort of early days of American popular music, both in the 19th century and in the early 20th century. He's also focused a little bit on the works of kind of the mid 20th century. He's written a book on the genre brill building, for instance, written a history of that. So Emerson, pretty solid foundational writer as far as kind of having an understanding of the course of American popular music. And that's an important lens to possess when we talk about Stephen Foster. Stephen Foster, I think, is a name that most Americans have probably interacted with, at least on a superficial level. We've certainly interacted with his songs, even if you don't necessarily know the name right off the top of your head. Foster, 19th century American songwriter, born in Pennsylvania, and made his living writing songs, and in doing so becoming the first American to really do that, writing popular songs anyways. And his songs, as I said, tracks like Oh Susanna, Camptown Races, Old Folks at Home, I Dream of Jeannie with the light brown hair, Beautiful Dreamer. So many songs that I think have ingrained themselves into the fabric of the United States, and I think so much of that has to do with the timing of them. Now, Stephen Foster is someone who, as we continue this project, as we continue this Music Deep Dive project, will come up, because if we want to talk about the history of recorded music, we need to talk about the history of popular music, specifically in the United States, before the recording era, and there's no figure more important to that development than Stephen Foster. So the story of Foster in and of itself is interesting in how he, in many ways, I think embodies a lot of the perhaps positives, but also negatives and concerns that we see with people who try to be self-made songwriters, people who try to make a living out of composition. Foster was acclaimed for his ability, and certainly his songs were very well known in the United States during the course of his life. But Foster, especially towards the end of his life, really struggled with making songwriting a financially viable affair, really struggled in terms of money, also in terms of his health, got really into drinking and alcoholism towards the end of his life. And his end, which came at a very young age, only at 37 years old, I believe, was, it's a premature end. And I feel like in many ways a foreshadowing of, the dangers of popular music to an extent. And that might be trying to draw too much of a through line where there really isn't one. But the Foster story in itself, I think, is interesting enough, but I think the way that Emerson frames it in this book is what really captivates me, because he tries to put it in a broader context. The most obvious one being the history of the United States at that time, specifically in relation to the Civil War and to slavery, but also taking a look at what American popular culture specifically was like and what American popular music looked like. And in order to do that, we need to understand the act of minstrelsy, and we need to understand the history of blackface. And this is an area where I don't know if Emerson goes into an incredible level of detail compared to like other books that dedicate themselves to the history of minstrelsy, which I have not read to this point, so I'm very curious to see kind of how this compares. But it is very methodical, and he will take entire chapters where he deviates from talking about Foster specifically to talking about these other issues, to talking about how, kind of how the act of minstrelsy and performing in blackface became popular for the first time in the United States. Not just popular, but became one of the most prominent forms of entertainment. And talking about how that evolved on some level, not in the sense of it necessarily becoming a more progressive or improved musical style, but more in the sense of, here are all these figures who were kind of trying to get in on this cash cow that is minstrelsy, because that's what it was. And Foster himself would find that anytime that he tried to deviate from writing for those songs, that it kind of sucked any financial viability away from his composing, and he would have to go right back to writing minstrel songs. Now, that's not a defense either. That's not me saying that, well, Foster had to write it just to make ends meet. Foster was very interested in that style of music and in that musical approach. He maybe was not quite the ardent racist, like from a relative standpoint, not quite the ardent racist that maybe we think of today compared to other people at the time. But by no means was he a progressive individual. By no means was he an abolitionist or an anti-slavery activist. Far from it. And this book talks about that, and this book talks about his perspectives. And I appreciate that this book also name drops several other prominent kind of black entertainers at that time who were really making waves in their own right, whether it be on kind of the classical scene or whether it be their own takes on some of the kind of minstrel approach. Again, that whole dynamic. Black artists performing traditionally quote unquote blackface songs and kind of, I don't know, approaching it from kind of an opposite angle, I suppose. And yeah, just grappling with all that. I think it is very effective in how it does that. I do agree with one critique that I saw written somewhere where they said that to an extent, it gets mired in that, and you do lose a little bit of the connection to like Foster's identity as a person, and like his personal life. But I'm also not necessarily that bothered by it. I think that, Foster's cultural significance is worth talking about more than who he was as a person. And I'm not sure that there's a whole lot that survives about what we know of him as a person. So it's not a creative decision that I dislike or extremely disagree with. I think it was well written. I think it was effectively detailed. I don't think it got into the weeds of anything so much for me to say that this is an academic approach. I think this is very much a popular biography that anybody could pick up. And I think that, the Stephen Foster story, I think what we can do is we can acknowledge the merit in his songs, because I think, his songs at their core are earworms for sure. And that's a lot of popular songs at that time, but I do think his tend to stick out in a very satisfying way. And he's got some beautiful music. I think Beautiful Dreamer is a lovely song. It's a fantastic melody, but I think it's fair to acknowledge the appreciation for those songs and also understand the roots of them, understand where they come from, and grapple with what that means, and grapple with, in that sense, what the roots of not just American popular music as we know it today, but really just the music industry as we know it today, grappling with what those roots are. Stephen Foster and his music is so integral to the development of the modern record industry and the modern popular music industry, and that is built on the backs of black music, that is built on the backs of minstrelsy and of appropriation and of racist ideals. And it is, and it's a staggering thing perhaps to come to terms with. Perhaps it's not. I think a lot of people probably accept that and understand it, even if they don't know the details behind it. But it's an important part of the history that can't be underestimated. We need to talk about it. And I think that this book handles it very adeptly. And I appreciate that. And from that standpoint, I would recommend it. I would recommend it wholeheartedly. It's not a book that's in print anymore, at least not to my knowledge. But if you can find a used copy of it, I actually got this used copy down in Chicago a few months ago. It is definitely worth checking out. So give it a read. Let me know what you think. With that, thanks so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. I appreciate you watching, and I will see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.